This is one of several short classes on the features of a business research report. Each of the classes is short, and each one is straightforward. And also each class is based on a much larger class that appears elsewhere in these notes, which will fill out in much more detail what each class is saying. But as far as we're concerned here, we have several classes, short classes, which go to make up this one big topic, features of a business research report. So in this session we're going to look at the findings and conclusions of a business research report and talk briefly about what goes on within the findings and conclusions and why they're important. So first of all, findings should be clearly indicated and supported by collected data, which should be ideally quantitative. Quantitative data is seen as more reliable, it's seen as more objective. So the findings should be clearly indicated and supported by collected data. So the findings should not be just the whim of the writer. It should not be just guesswork on the part of the writer. It should be based on collected data, which ideally should be quantitative. It should present all of the relevant data. All of the data should be looked at. So the writer should not have the license to simply select the part of the data that suits his or her case or suits his or her point of view. So all of the data, the relevant data, should be used and presented. The section is sometimes called the analysis. So it depends really on the project, it depends on the way it's set up and designed. In business, the findings normally must be based on the analysis, of course, but normally those two sections are run together. It's much more liberal in the way it's designed than, for example, an academic piece of work, which would have one section for the analysis and one section for the findings. The analysis coming first. It should show the outcomes from the research, and it may test the hypothesis. There may be a hypothesis. The hypothesis could be a statement given to the researchers by the management. The hypothesis is, if we do the following, will we increase sales? Now that's a question, but that's a question or hypothesis that needs to be addressed. That's what the purpose of the research, business research project perhaps is to do. So that is important. It may use a variety of presentation styles to illustrate the outcomes. For example, it could use charts, graphs, tables, all sorts of ways of presenting the outcome. Of course, it may be printed off and bound up and presented in paper format, or it could be a business presentation using perhaps presentation packages, business presentation packages. So the findings is what comes out of the analysis. It comes out of the research work. And they should be objective. They should not be based on the views of the researcher, and they should not be misinterpreted either accidentally or deliberately by the readers to suit their own point of view. This is, or it should be, quite an objective exercise. Now, having got the findings, the next part is based on the findings. The next part is the conclusion, or the conclusions. It may be more than one conclusion, but the conclusions are based on the findings. The conclusions can't be based on anything else. So they're drawn from the findings. They can't be drawn from anywhere else. That's the purpose of the conclusions, or the conclusion is to say what the research has found. And what it's found has been presented in the findings. That's what the research findings were. So the conclusions state those. They should be directly related to the research objectives or hypotheses. The conclusions should answer the question, the original research question, whatever that was. So the conclusion should address the research objectives. If it's addressing something else, then something has gone wrong. This piece of work has answered a question that was not asked, and that would be sort of somewhat silly. So the research objectives should be the focus of the discussion in the conclusions. The conclusion should be clearly explained, as it's wrong to leave the interpretation of the results to the reader. So everything should be done for the reader. The results should be clearly and logically explained. And the conclusion should be based entirely on the analysis of the data, and this should be adequate to justify the conclusions. So the conclusions must be based entirely on the data, on the analysis of the data, nothing else. So that's our very brief discussion of findings and conclusions, which is part of the business research report, and this is one class in a whole sequence, or a whole series of classes I should say, which go to make up this topic. So let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.